Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here with us again as we take another journey back in time to uncover the forgotten wisdom of the past. If you are new here, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and join our growing community of history lovers and frugal living enthusiasts. Leave a comment down below and tell me where you are watching from, and if your parents or grandparents had any unique ways of saving a dollar. Your support means the world to us, and it is the only way we can keep digging into history to bring these lost secrets back into the light. Today, we are going to tackle something that affects absolutely every single one of us: our wallets. We live in a modern era where financial anxiety is at an all-time high, where the cost of living seems to outpace our incomes every single month, and where consumer debt has become an inescapable heavy chain around the necks of millions of families. But what if I told you that the solution to our modern financial nightmare isn't a new smartphone budgeting app, a complicated cryptocurrency investment, or working 3 side hustles until you burn out? What if the ultimate secret to building lasting wealth and financial peace was already perfected over 70 years ago by our grandmothers and grandfathers? Today, we are exploring Grandma's secret 1950s money hack. It wasn't just a single trick. It was a comprehensive, brilliant, and entirely forgotten philosophy of living that allowed single-income families of the mid-20th century to buy homes, raise multiple children, and build generational wealth without ever drowning in the toxic ocean of modern debt. To truly understand this 1950s financial secret, we first have to completely shatter a very persistent modern myth about that decade. When we look back at the 1950s through the rosy, nostalgic lens of classic television shows, vintage advertisements, and popular culture, we tend to see an era of explosive, effortless prosperity. We picture shiny new chrome-covered automobiles parked in the driveways of pristine suburban homes, matching sets of pastel-colored kitchen appliances, and families happily consuming the new wonders of the post-war American dream. It is incredibly easy for us, sitting here in our modern, hyper-commercialized world, to assume that the people of the 1950s were simply flush with cash and spending it with reckless abandon. We assume they had it easy. But this visual narrative completely ignores the profound underlying psychological reality of the adults who were actually running those 1950s households. The young mothers and fathers who were buying those first suburban homes and raising the baby boomer generation did not grow up in an era of wealth. They were the children of the Great Depression. Their formative, defining years were spent watching their own parents struggle to put a single meal on the table, watching banks collapse and life savings evaporate overnight, and learning the harsh, unforgiving lessons of absolute scarcity. You do not simply forget the trauma of the 1930s just because the calendar flips to 1950 and the economy improves. Because of this deep-seated collective historical trauma, the 1950s, homemaker approached the concept of money with a level of intense, calculated caution that is almost entirely alien to the modern consumer. Their core financial philosophy was not built on the pursuit of endless luxury. It was built on an aggressive, defensive strategy of security. The 1950s money hack was, at its very foundation, a profound psychological barrier against the creeping temptation of debt. Today, our entire economic system is explicitly designed to remove every possible point of friction from the act of spending money. We have one-click purchasing on our phones, credit cards stored in our digital wallets, and a buy now, pay later schemes disguised as helpful payment plans for everything from luxury clothing to basic groceries. We are constantly, aggressively bombarded with the message that we deserve to have exactly what we want, right this very second, regardless of whether we actually possess the money to pay for it. The modern world treats debt as a normal, unavoidable, and entirely acceptable tool for navigating daily life. Our grandparents operated in a universe where the very concept of unsecured consumer debt was not just financially dangerous, it was viewed as a profound moral failing. To borrow money for anything other than a modest home mortgage was to invite the terrifying specter of ruin back into your life. If a 1950s family wanted a new television set, a new winter coat, or a vacation, they did not finance it. They utilized a system that has virtually vanished from the modern retail landscape: the layaway plan. They would go to the department store, pick out the item, and the store would hold it in the back room while the family made small weekly cash payments over the course of months. They did not get the instant gratification of taking the item home that day. They had to endure the waiting, the anticipation, and the strict discipline of handing over hard-earned cash week after week until the item was fully paid for. This high-friction method of purchasing forced people to deeply, intensely evaluate whether they truly wanted or needed the item in question. By the time you spent 6 months paying off a bicycle or a sewing machine on layaway, you understood the exact translation of your working hours into that physical object. You valued it. You protected it. Ooh. The secret of the 1950s wasn't that they made more money. It was that they fiercely protected the money they had by refusing to participate in the illusion of credit. They understood that when you buy on credit, you were essentially stealing from your own future. And a generation that had survived the total economic collapse of the Depression was never, ever going to risk their hard-won future for the sake of instant gratification today. The absolute cornerstone of this defensive financial strategy, the physical mechanism that made Grandma's money hack actually function on a daily basis, was the legendary envelope system. To a modern audience accustomed to direct deposits, banking apps, and contactless digital payments, the envelope system might sound quaint, simplistic, or even primitively outdated. But in reality, it was a ruthless, mathematically flawless method of household accounting that absolutely guaranteed a family would never spend more money than they brought in. The magic of the envelope system was rooted in the profound psychological difference between handling physical, tangible cash and swiping an invisible, abstract piece of plastic. When you tap your phone to pay for a $6 coffee today, your brain does not register a true sense of loss. A number simply changes on a digital screen hidden behind an app. It feels entirely disconnected from your physical labor. But the 1950s economy was built on the undeniable heavy reality of paper and coin. The ritual began every Friday afternoon, which was the standard payday for the vast majority of working-class families. The husband would bring home his physical pay envelope, often literally a small brown paper envelope containing his wages in cash and coins, minus his tax deductions. The moment that envelope hit the kitchen table, the true financial management of the household began, and it was almost universally managed by the wife. She functioned as the chief financial officer of the family, and her desk was the Formica kitchen table. She would sit down with a stack of plain white envelopes, a pencil, and a ledger. Each envelope was meticulously labeled with a specific, non-negotiable category of the household budget. There was an envelope for the mortgage or rent, an envelope for groceries, an envelope for the milkman, the utility bill, church tithing, clothing, and the coal or oil for the furnace. The cash from the pay packet was physically divided and distributed into these specific envelopes down to the very last penny. This process forced a profound, deeply visual confrontation with the reality of the family's income. You could physically see the pile of cash shrinking as it was distributed into the mandatory bills. Whatever was left over after the absolute necessities were funded was incredibly small, and this was the money allocated for saving or incredibly rare discretionary spending. The golden, unbreakable rule of the envelope system was absolute containment. If the grocery envelope was empty by Thursday morning, you did not, under any circumstances, reach into the rent envelope to buy more food. You simply made do with whatever was left in the pantry until Friday. You ate beans, you made a massive pot of cheap soup, or you baked a Depression-era water pie. The empty envelope was a hard, physical boundary that could not be argued with, negotiated with, or bypassed with a credit card. It provided immediate, undeniable feedback. When the cash was gone, the spending instantly stopped. This level of intense physical friction created a hyper-awareness of prices and value. When a 1950s housewife went to the grocery store, she wasn't absent-mindedly tossing items into her cart while listening to a podcast. She was walking the aisles holding a precise physical stack of dollar bills from her grocery envelope. She was constantly doing complex mental mathematics, weighing the cost of a roast against the cost of a chicken, calculating how many meals she could stretch out of a bag of flour, and ensuring that she would have enough change left over to cover the milk delivery on Wednesday. She experienced the actual physical pain of handing over her cash to the cashier. Modern behavioral economists have proven that human beings experience a genuine psychological pain response when they hand over physical cash, a pain response that is completely bypassed when using credit cards. The envelope system harnessed that natural psychological pain to naturally suppress impulse buying. You couldn't be easily manipulated by an end-cap display of expensive, sugary treats if buying them meant you physically wouldn't have enough dollar bills to buy meat for Sunday dinner. Bringing this physical, high-friction system back into our modern lives is arguably the single most effective way to instantly halt the bleeding of a modern budget. Today, our money is invisible, which makes it incredibly easy to lose. We have multiple streaming subscriptions draining our accounts automatically every month, gym memberships we never use, and the constant slow drip of frictionless online purchases. If a modern family were to withdraw their discretionary spending budget in physical cash at the beginning of the month, divide it into physical envelopes for groceries, entertainment, and dining out, and commit to only spending what is inside those envelopes, the psychological shock would be immediate and profound. You would suddenly become acutely, painfully aware of exactly how fast your money evaporates when you tap that card. The 1950s envelope system teaches us that true financial control requires us to make our money visible, tangible, and difficult to part with. By reintroducing friction into our spending habits, we build a fortress around our wealth that modern marketing simply cannot penetrate. The third major component of Grandma's 1950s money hack wasn't directly about how they managed their cash. It was about how they managed the physical objects they brought into their homes. Today, we live in what is universally recognized as a throwaway culture, deeply infected by the concept of planned obsolescence. The goods we purchase, from our expensive electronic appliances to our cheap fast fashion clothing, are intentionally designed by corporations to break, tear, or become culturally irrelevant within a shockingly short time frame. We have been aggressively trained to view repair as a frustrating waste of time, an inconvenience, or, in many cases, a physical impossibility due to glued-together components and cheap, irreparable materials. When a modern toaster stops popping, a smartphone battery degrades, or a pair of jeans develops a tear, our immediate conditioned response is to throw the item into a landfill and pull out our credit card to buy a brand new replacement. We hemorrhage massive, unimaginable amounts of our annual income simply replacing things we already own. In the 1950s, this constant rapid cycle of consumption and disposal would have been viewed as absolute, incomprehensible madness. The financial philosophy of the mid-century household was deeply rooted in the concept of the maintenance economy. When a 1950s family saved up their money to buy a vacuum cleaner, a stand mixer, a heavy winter coat, or a pair of leather shoes, they viewed that purchase as a long-term, potentially lifetime investment. They fully expected that item to serve them for decades, and they understood that the only way to achieve that longevity was through rigorous preventative maintenance and relentless repair. The money hack of the 1950s was realizing that $1 saved by repairing an old item was exactly equal to $1 earned at a grueling job. Repair was not a quaint hobby. It was a fundamental wage-earning activity of the household. Let's look at the reality of the 1950s home. It was filled with heavy, durable goods made of thick steel, solid wood, real glass, and heavy canvas. But more importantly, these items were specifically engineered to be taken apart, serviced, and put back together. Every neighborhood had a network of repairmen, the local cobbler who could completely resole a pair of worn leather shoes, the TV repairman who could test and replace a burnt-out vacuum tube in the back of the massive wooden console television, the tailor who could take in or let out the seams of a suit, and the small appliance repair shop that could rewind the motor of a broken fan. But the vast majority of the repair work happened right at home, divided by traditional gender roles into a massive, invisible shadow economy of labor. The husband typically maintained a workbench in the garage or the basement, equipped with heavy metal tools, oil, soldering irons, and a massive collection of salvaged screws and nails stored in old glass jars. He spent his weekends changing the oil in the heavy steel automobile, sharpening the blades of the pushmower with a file, greasing hinges, rewiring frayed lamp cords, and painting the wooden exterior of the house to prevent rot. The wife's domain of repair was equally, if not more, rigorous. She spent her evenings engaging in the grueling, highly skilled art of darning and mending. She used a wooden darning egg to meticulously reweave the blown-out heels of her husband's woolwork socks. She turned the frayed, worn collars of dress shirts inside out and re-sewed them so they looked brand new. She let down the hems of children's trousers as they grew, and when a piece of clothing was finally truly beyond any possible repair, it was never thrown away. It was stripped of its valuable buttons and zippers, and the remaining fabric was cut up to be used as cleaning rags, or meticulously saved to be quilted into heavy winter blankets. This absolute refusal to throw things away was a massive financial shield. Imagine the thousands of dollars a modern family could save every single year if they adopted even a fraction of this 1950s maintenance mindset. Instead of throwing away a pair of expensive boots when the heel wears down, spending $30 at a local cobbler can extend their life for another 5 years. Instead of buying cheap synthetic clothing that falls apart after 3 washes, investing in higher quality natural fibers and learning the basic, lost art of sewing a button or patching a seam can completely eliminate your annual clothing budget. Instead of throwing away a vacuum cleaner because it lost suction, spending 10 minutes watching a free online tutorial to clear a simple clog or replace a $3 belt keeps your money firmly in your own pocket. The 1950s maintenance economy teaches us that we do not have to be helpless victims of modern consumerism. By taking extreme proactive ownership of the physical goods we bring into our lives, and by honoring the materials and the labor it took to create them, we can permanently plug one of the largest, most insidious financial leaks in the modern household budget. If the envelope system was the defensive wall and the maintenance economy was the shield, then the 1950s kitchen was the absolute, undeniable engine room of household wealth accumulation. Today, food is one of the largest, most unpredictable, and most stressful categories of the modern family budget. We spend exorbitant amounts of money on prepackaged convenience foods, expensive meal delivery kits, highly processed snacks, and massive quantities of out-of-season produce that we routinely allow to rot in the bottom drawers of our refrigerators. We treat the modern grocery store as a place of leisure and entertainment, wandering the aisles and tossing impulse purchases into our carts based on colorful packaging and clever marketing. The 1950s housewife, on the other hand, treated the grocery store as a hostile environment, and she approached the task of feeding her family with the strategic brilliance of a military general. The 1950s was a transitional era in American food culture. The modern supermarket was just beginning to emerge, offering an unprecedented array of new, processed convenience foods, canned soups, frozen TV dinners, boxed cake mixes, and instant potatoes. These items were aggressively marketed to the housewife as modern miracles that would liberate her from the drudgery of the kitchen. But the frugal 1950s mother, remembering the harsh scarcity of the Depression, looked at these expensive convenience foods with intense suspicion. She knew exactly what modern food corporations don't want us to know. When you buy a prepackaged processed meal, you are not just paying for the ingredients. You're paying a massive inflated premium for the factory labor, the colorful cardboard packaging, the national advertising campaigns, and the corporate profit margins. The 1950s money hack was the absolute, unyielding commitment to scratch cooking. The financial power of scratch cooking lay in the ability to buy cheap, raw, unprocessed bulk ingredients and use human labor and culinary technique to transform them into highly nutritious, satisfying meals. Flour, yeast, sugar, salt, oats, beans, root vegetables, and cheap cuts of meat were the foundation of the 1950s pantry. Bread was not bought in plastic bags. It was kneaded and baked at home for pennies a loaf. Meat was not the massive center-of-the-plate focal point that it is today. Meat was incredibly expensive, and it was treated with immense respect and used primarily as a flavoring agent rather than the main course. This was the golden age of the stretching technique. If a housewife bought a small pound of ground beef, she did not make 3 large hamburgers out of it. She mixed that expensive beef with cheap, bulky fillers like rolled oats, breadcrumbs, grated onions, and carrots to create a massive, dense meatloaf that could feed a family of 6 and still leave leftovers for sandwiches the next day. This era also birthed the absolute mastery of the casserole. The casserole was not just a comforting family dish. It was a brilliant economic vehicle designed specifically to utilize leftovers and stretch expensive proteins. A single, cheap roasting chicken could be stretched to cover 3 different meals. The first night was a small portion of roast chicken with a massive mountain of cheap potatoes and homegrown vegetables. The second night, the leftover scraps of meat were meticulously picked off the bone, mixed with a cheap can of condensed mushroom soup, inexpensive pasta or rice, and topped with crushed crackers to create a massive filling casserole. And the third night, the stripped carcass of the chicken, which a modern consumer would immediately throw in the trash, was boiled for hours with vegetable scraps to create a rich, incredibly nutritious bone broth for soup. Furthermore, the 1950s kitchen operated on a strict, terrifyingly efficient zero-waste policy. Absolutely nothing was thrown away. Bacon grease was poured into a designated glass jar on the stove and used to fry potatoes or flavor vegetables. Stale bread was never discarded. It was ground into breadcrumbs, soaked in milk for meatloaf, or transformed into sweetbread pudding for dessert. Leftover vegetables from Tuesday's dinner were seamlessly incorporated into Wednesday's soup. The financial leakage of food waste, which cost the average modern family thousands of dollars a year, simply did not exist in the 1950s kitchen. By reverting to these basic, fundamental principles of scratch cooking, learning the lost art of stretching expensive proteins with cheap, healthy grains and legumes, and adopting a zero-tolerance policy for food waste, a modern family can easily cut their monthly grocery bill in half while simultaneously eating significantly healthier, more deeply satisfying meals. The 1950s housewife knew that the fastest, most effective way to build a family's savings account wasn't by asking the boss for a raise. It was by mastering the frugal, beautiful alchemy of the kitchen stove. When we examine the financial hemorrhaging of the modern household, one of the most glaring, massive, and widely accepted drains on our wealth sites parked right in our driveways. In the year 2026, the modern approach to transportation has become an absolute financial nightmare disguised as a basic necessity. It is entirely common and often expected for a modern family to own 2, 3, or even 4 vehicles. We are trapped in a relentless, normalized cycle of leasing brand new cars every 3 years or taking out massive, high-interest 7-year loans for luxury SUVs that rapidly depreciate the moment their tires touch the pavement outside the dealership. The average monthly car payment, combined with astronomical insurance premiums, constant digital maintenance requirements, and fuel costs, easily consumes a terrifying percentage of a family's take-home pay. We treat vehicles not as utilitarian machines designed to get us from point A to point B, but as disposable status symbols, constantly upgrading to secure the newest digital dashboard or the sleekest exterior design. We have willingly chained ourselves to decades of automotive debt, convincing ourselves that we simply have no other choice in the modern world. But if we look back at the suburban landscape of the 1950s, we encounter a radically different, highly disciplined approach to the automobile that served as a massive pillar of their financial security. The 1950s is famously remembered as the golden age of American car culture, the era of massive tail fins, gleaming chrome bumpers, and the birth of the interstate highway system. Yet, despite this cultural obsession with the automobile, the overwhelming majority of 1950s households operated strictly as one-car families. The family car was a massive, carefully considered financial investment, often purchased with saved cash or paid off incredibly quickly. It was not a disposable commodity to be traded in when the ashtray got full. Because the household only had one vehicle, the entire logistics of daily life had to be brilliantly engineered around sharing, walking, and community cooperation. When the husband took the single-family car to work in the morning or joined a neighborhood carpool to save on fuel and wear and tear, the wife and children were left without a vehicle for the entire day. This was not viewed as a paralyzing hardship. It was simply the reality of life, and it dictated a hyper-local, deeply frugal existence. If the 1950s housewife needed groceries, she did not casually jump into a 2-ton SUV to drive 3 miles for a single carton of milk. She walked to the local neighborhood grocer, where she relied on the intricate, highly efficient network of home delivery services, the milkman, the breadman, and the local butcher who delivered directly to the kitchen door. Children walked or rode their bicycles to school, to the park, and to their friends' houses, completely eliminating the modern phenomenon of the parents acting as unpaid full-time taxi drivers. Furthermore, the 1950s family car was treated with an intense level of mechanical reverence. Because they could not simply rely on a warranty or a quick trade-in if something broke, preventative maintenance was treated as a religious duty. The weekend driveway mechanic was a staple of 1950s suburban life. Fathers and sons spent their Saturday mornings changing the thick black motor oil, replacing spark plugs, adjusting the carburetor, and meticulously washing and waxing the heavy steel body to prevent rust. They understood that the physical labor they invested under the hood of that car directly translated to years of extended life for the vehicle, which in turn meant thousands of dollars saved by delaying the purchase of a replacement. The car was kept running through sheer willpower, basic mechanical knowledge, and a fierce refusal to take on unnecessary debt. Applying this 1950s automotive philosophy to a modern lifestyle is perhaps the most difficult yet financially explosive change a family can make today. The sheer amount of wealth that can be unlocked by transitioning from a 2-car household to a 1-car household is staggering. By eliminating just 1 car payment, cutting your insurance bill in half, and removing the maintenance and fuel costs of a second vehicle, a modern family can easily reclaim $5,000 to $10,000 a year. That is life-changing money that can be redirected toward paying off a mortgage, investing for retirement, or completely eliminating credit card debt. Even if dropping to a single car is geographically impossible, simply adopting the 1950s mindset of driving an older, reliable used car until the wheels physically fall off, refusing the toxic allure of the permanent car payment, and learning basic fundamental maintenance skills can radically transform your financial trajectory. The 1950s money hack teaches us that true freedom isn't found in the smell of a new car. It is found in the profound, unshakable peace of mind that comes from owing absolutely nothing to the bank. Let us step out of the driveway and walk through the front door, directly into the living room, to examine another massive silent drain on the modern wallet, the commercialization of our leisure time. Today, the concept of entertainment has been entirely commodified and outsourced to massive corporations. We bleed hundreds of dollars every single month on a dizzying array of digital streaming subscriptions, premium cable packages, high-speed internet, and video game microtransactions. When we actually leave the house for entertainment, the costs skyrocket even further. We spend small fortunes on expensive restaurant dinners simply to socialize with our friends. We buy overpriced tickets to crowded theme parks, and we enroll our children in exhausting, highly expensive travel sports leagues and endless paid activities. We have been thoroughly conditioned to believe that in order to experience joy, relaxation, or meaningful connection with others, we must first pull out our credit cards and pay an admission fee. We have confused the act of consuming entertainment with the act of actually living. The 1950s household approached leisure and socialization from a completely opposite, intensely frugal paradigm. To the frugal homemaker of the mid-20th century, the home was not just a place to sleep and eat between expensive outings. The home was the absolute, undisputed center of all entertainment and social life. Because money was tightly controlled by the envelope system and discretionary funds for fun were incredibly scarce, families had to manufacture their own joy using the resources they already possessed. Entertainment was inherently active, communal, and almost entirely free. The television set was a new, magical invention in the 1950s, but it was not the isolated, multi-screen experience we have today, where every family member retreats to their own bedroom to watch a different algorithmically generated feed on a tablet. The television was a massive, expensive piece of wooden furniture located in the main living space, and watching it was a scheduled communal family event. But even more important than the television was the culture of the front porch and the neighborhood gathering. Socializing did not require booking a table at a trendy, overpriced restaurant. It consisted of adults sitting on folding chairs in the driveway or on the porch on a warm summer evening, drinking cheap iced tea or a single cold beer, and simply talking to their neighbors for hours while the children caught fireflies in the grass. When 1950s families wanted to host a gathering or celebrate a milestone, they relied heavily on the economic brilliance of the potluck dinner. The idea of one family shouldering the entire financial burden of feeding a dozen guests was considered ridiculous. Instead, the cost and the labor were equally distributed across the entire community. One neighbor brought a cheap filling casserole, another brought a gelatin salad, another brought a homemade pie. The focus was entirely on the rich face-to-face human connection, the loud laughter, and the shared experience, not on the prestige of expensive ingredients or the ambiance of a paid venue. They played board games, they organized neighborhood card games that lasted late into the night, they borrowed books relentlessly from the local public library, and they listened to free radio broadcasts. They understood that the deepest, most memorable human experiences are almost always the ones that cost absolutely nothing. The modern financial lesson here is profound. If you were to sit down and honestly audit the amount of money your family spends on outsourced, commercialized entertainment and dining out over the course of a single year, the final number would likely be terrifying. By deliberately pivoting back to the 1950s make-at-home entertainment culture, you can instantly recapture a massive portion of your income. Host a potluck dinner party instead of meeting friends at a restaurant where the bill will easily top $200. Cancel the 4 redundant streaming services you barely watch and rediscover the massive free digital and physical archives of your local library. Replace expensive weekend outings with hiking, exploring local free parks, or simply instituting a family board game night. The 1950s generation proves that you do not have to spend a fortune to build a rich, vibrant, deeply connected life. In fact, by stripping away the expensive artificial distractions of modern commercial entertainment, you often force yourself to engage more deeply with the people right in front of you, enriching your life in ways that money simply cannot buy. As we continue to dissect the brilliant financial architecture of the 1950s household, we must open the doors to the bedroom closet. The modern American closet is a testament to the environmental and financial catastrophe of fast fashion. We are currently living in an era where clothing is cheaper, more abundant, and of lower quality than at any other point in human history. We routinely buy shirts for $5, wear them 3 times until the cheap synthetic threads begin to unravel or the shape distorts in the wash, and then thoughtlessly toss them into the garbage. Despite having closets that are literally bursting at the seams with dozens of pairs of shoes, stacks of jeans, and endless rows of brightly colored tops, the modern consumer constantly complains that they have nothing to wear. We use clothing shopping as a form of retail therapy, a quick dopamine hit to cure a bad day, blindly handing over our hard-earned money for garments that we don't actually need and won't even remember buying a month later. To a mother managing a household budget in the 1950s, this modern relationship with clothing would look like a scene from a dystopian nightmare. In the mid-20th century, clothing was a massive, highly respected category of the household budget. Because the modern globalized supply chain of ultra-cheap overseas labor did not yet exist, clothing was relatively expensive compared to the average income. Buying a new dress, a man's suit, or a pair of leather shoes required significant saving and intense deliberation. Because of this high cost, the 1950s wardrobe was incredibly small, highly structured, and ruthlessly maintained. Long before modern minimalist influencers coined the trendy term capsule wardrobe, our grandmothers were living it out of absolute necessity. The most legendary and strictly enforced rule of the 1950s wardrobe was the rigid separation between school clothes or church clothes and play clothes. The moment a child walked through the front door after school, before they were allowed to eat a snack or go outside to play, they were given a strict, non-negotiable command: go change your clothes. The nice, expensive slacks, the pressed skirts, and the good leather shoes were immediately removed, carefully folded or hung up on wooden hangers, and replaced with worn-out denim jeans, patched t-shirts, and scuffed sneakers. This daily ritual was a massive financial defense mechanism. It ensured that the expensive, high-quality garments were protected from grass stains, torn knees, and the general destruction of childhood play, extending their lifespan by years. Furthermore, the 1950s culture embraced the absolute financial necessity of the hand-me-down system. Today, there's a bizarre modern stigma attached to wearing used clothing, driven by a consumer culture that demands everything be brand new and perfectly trendy. In the 1950s, passing clothes down from an older sibling to a younger sibling or trading boxes of outgrown clothes with neighbors and cousins was an organized, highly respected system of community wealth preservation. A high-quality wool winter coat was expected to keep 3 or 4 different children warm over the course of a decade, and if a piece of clothing didn't fit perfectly, they didn't throw it away. They utilized the sewing skills passed down from the Depression era to hem the pants, take in the waist, or alter the collar. They bought high-quality, durable fabrics like thick cotton, heavy wool, and real linen, because they knew those materials could survive years of boiling, scrubbing, and mending. The financial wisdom locked inside the 1950s closet is a powerful antidote to the modern fast fashion disease. By simply refusing to participate in the endless cycle of microtrends and retail therapy, you can save thousands of dollars. If we adopt the 1950s mindset of buying only a few high-quality, timeless staple pieces, treating them with immense care, washing them gently, and repairing them when they tear, our clothing budget drops to almost zero. We must bring back the strict rule of changing into play clothes or house clothes when we get home from work to protect our professional investments. We must aggressively normalize wearing clothes until they wear out and strip away the toxic modern shame associated with wearing a repaired garment. By making our clothing last a decade instead of a season, we reclaim control over our money and reject the corporate machine that relies on our constant, mindless consumption. We have explored the physical mechanics of Grandma's 1950s money hack, from the ruthless discipline of the envelope system and the absolute rejection of debt, to the zero-waste kitchen, the maintenance economy, and the highly structured wardrobe. But as we reach the conclusion of this journey into the past, we must uncover the final, most profound, and most powerful secret of all. The ultimate reason why the 1950s generation was able to build such incredible, lasting financial stability wasn't just because they were good at math or because they knew how to darn a sock. The true foundation of their wealth was deeply psychological. The greatest money hack of the 1950s was the immense psychological power of contentment. Today, we live in a digital ecosystem that is scientifically engineered to make us feel inadequate, poor, and perpetually unsatisfied. The moment you open social media on your smartphone, you are subjected to a relentless, high-definition bombardment of other people's highlight reels. You see influencers driving luxury cars you can't afford, friends taking exotic European vacations, and strangers showcasing massive, perfectly decorated mansion interiors. This constant, unavoidable exposure to extreme curated wealth triggers a deeply toxic psychological phenomenon: the disease of comparison. We look at our perfectly functional 5-year-old car, our modest home, and our normal clothes, and the modern marketing machine whispers in our ear that we are failing, that we need more, that we deserve more. And so, we pull out our credit cards and willingly drown ourselves in high-interest debt just to project an illusion of success, desperately trying to keep up with the Joneses in a race that has no finish line. The parents of the 1950s, the generation that had survived the breadlines of the Great Depression and the horrific rationing of the Second World War, possessed a psychological armor that made them largely immune to this modern disease of comparison. Yes, the 1950s saw the birth of modern advertising and the rise of the consumer culture, but the adults managing the money had a deeply ingrained, unshakable definition of the word enough. To a man who had spent his youth wondering if he would eat that day, or a woman who had spent her early 20s rationing sugar and saving tinfoil for the war effort, a modest 3-bedroom house with a small yard and a single reliable car in the driveway was not a stepping stone to a bigger mansion. It was the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. They were profoundly, deeply grateful for basic stability. They did not tie their self-worth to the logo on their handbag or the brand of their automobile. Their dignity was derived from their work ethic, their community standing, and their ability to provide a safe, warm, and debt-free environment for their children. When you possess that level of deep internal contentment, modern marketing loses all of its power over you. You cannot be tricked into buying a massive, expensive new television if you are perfectly happy gathering around a small radio or playing a board game with your family. You cannot be guilted into buying a brand new luxury car if you take genuine pride in the mechanical skill required to keep an older car running beautifully. The 1950s generation understood that true financial peace is not achieved by infinitely expanding your income to meet your endless desires. True financial peace is achieved by placing a firm, unbreakable cap on your desires, allowing your income to effortlessly outpace your spending. This is the ultimate lesson we must take away from our grandparents. You can implement every budgeting trick, every kitchen hack, and every maintenance routine in the world. But if you do not cure the underlying disease of constant comparison, you will never build lasting wealth. We must learn to look around at the incredible abundance we already possess and definitively say, "This is enough." We must aggressively curate our modern environment, turning off the screens and tuning out the voices that tell us we need to spend money to be happy. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lost financial wisdom of the 1950s. I truly hope this video has inspired you to look at your own budget, your own home, and your own mindset through a different, more empowered lens. If you found value in these forgotten secrets, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that this history is worth sharing. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss our next journey into the past. And right now, I want you to head down to the comments section and tell me your story. What was the most brilliant, frugal thing your parents or grandparents did to save money? Are there any 1950s habits you still practice in your own home today? I read every single comment, and your stories are what keep the warmth and wisdom of that generation alive. Until next time, remember that the smartest financial moves aren't always the newest ones. Sometimes, the best way forward is to look back. We will see you in the next video. We will see